story.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. I can recognize a lot of stuff. Their names. Stuff.
Yeah, one of our meetings was canceled in February, so we only had one week, so we went to the board of.
Yeah. I don't know. But Art was there because he asked the appropriate questions. The rest of us were not in tune to what the exact law said. I was under the impression the overlay,
Good.
resource protection overlay.
All right, I'd like to call the regular Open Spaces Commission meeting to order for February 27th, 2023. Robert, can we have roll call?
Yep, Commissioner
Here?
Commissioner Bruce Hoffman is not present. Commissioner Bruce Fox here. Commissioner Mary Norton
Here.
Commissioner Lena Wallen
Here.
Commissioner Anna White
Here.
Commissioner Jillian Worson is not present. And Councilmember Representative Deborah Harris not present.
All right, moving on to the land acknowledgement statement. The Flagstaff Open Spaces Commission humbly acknowledges the ancestral homelands of this area's indigenous nations and original stewards. These lands still inhabited by native descendants of Border Mountain sacred to indigenous peoples. We honor them, their legacies, their traditions, and their continued contributions. We celebrate their past, present, and future generations who will forever know this place as home. Moving on to approval of the January 23rd meeting minutes. Is there any discussion or corrections to the minutes as they're currently written? Hearing none, do I hear a motion to approve?
I move to approve the minutes of meeting from January 29th.
Commissioner Wallen, second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Fox, okay, and all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, minutes are approved as written. Moving on to public participation. At this time, any member of the public may address the commission on any subject that is not scheduled before the commission on this day. The Arizona open meeting law prohibits the commission from discussing or acting on an item which is not listed on the prepared agenda. Commission members may, however, respond to criticism made by those addressing the commission, ask staff to review a matter, or ask that a matter be placed on a future agenda. To address the commission, to address the commission on an item that is on the agenda, please wait for the chair to call for public comment at the time that the item is heard. Is there anyone here from the public that wishes to speak on a subject not on the agenda tonight? Anybody online?
I don't see anything.
Okay. All right, hearing none, I guess we'll move on to business items. First one was staff introduction of Sarah Holich.
Yep, Sarah has been with us for a month now, and she came to introduce herself. She's been doing great work, so I'll turn it over to her.
Yes, I'm at the exact 1 month mark because the last meeting was my first day that I attended. I was online after the orientation online for the city, but I've been living in Flagstaff for probably the last almost 10 years now. I came up here for college to attend the NAU and study environmental sustainability and political science and philosophy. And after I graduated, I was working at the Flagstaff Climbing Gym downtown, where I managed the gym and sort of saw all the operations there and hosted events and things like that. But I sort of felt the need to return to the world of environmentalism and sustainability. So, and then I learned from working at the climbing gym that my passion really lies in serving the community. So I started looking for jobs with the city, and this posting for the open space educator came up, and I applied, and now I'm here. So I will be working with local schools primarily to particularly high schools and middle school age students that are closer to career planning to sort of engage them in our open spaces, try to connect teachers to the availability of that space to sort of bring their education outside and to sort of spark an interest in youth with becoming stewards of the land and such. So that's what I've been doing, is sort of reaching out to schools and other organizations that work particularly with like lower income neighborhoods and students, people of color, and who have like historically been underserved in our community. So I've been developing curriculums and lesson plans to provide them, and then hopefully be doing some of the educating myself. Yeah. If anyone has any questions?
It's great, welcome.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, we're super excited to have Sarah here. She's board for a year with our grant funded position from the state of Arizona. And we do hope to extend that at the end of her term if possible. So, very excited.
Okay, item B, under the business items, strategic plan review and revision. The requested action on this item is informational and discussion. So do you want to kind of
You bet.
kick it off?
Yeah. Just to kind of recap our last discussion, when we chatted about this, we talked a little bit about paring down the current strategic plan that the commission has and making it a little bit more manageable and a little bit more pointed. So Sylvia, thank you so much for doing all the rest of this. She worked on this. We kept, of course, the kind of the basic structure. She narrowed it down to the two main goals that the commission kind of talked about being involved in. And so we can just kind of go through that together, and feel free to jump in here at any moment. If you have questions, comments, or edits here. So the goals and the strategies. Goal one being to bring about an expanded integrated open space system through acquisitions by recognizing and capitalizing on opportunities that become available while continuing the current protection of our open space properties. And there are a number of action items and a few strategies underneath, so I'll just touch base very quickly on the strategies here. But if you have questions, feel free to let me know. To collaborate to create a comprehensive open space master plan for the Flagstaff community. I think we had mentioned before that we're working with Parks and Rec and events to come up with a conclusive master plan for updating for the entire division. So we currently don't have a master plan for open space, so that would be a great step. I think that would help meet several of the commission's goals by getting some of the goals related to the open space system on paper and then published for community input. The strategy 1.2, actively collaborate with key partners on a regular basis. This is something that came up pretty routinely in our meetings, including establishing lines of communication with planning and zoning and parks and recreation commissions. So a number of action items there. Strategy 1.3 is to replace the loss of Schultz Creek natural area. So we identified a couple of action items. This is a new strategy that wasn't in the original strategic plan that the commission asked to see. Strategy 1.4 to update the city council code, or excuse me, the Flagstaff city code to clarify and strengthen the protection of Flagstaff open spaces properties. It's a project we've been working on for some time, and we should pick back up again. So that's it for the first goal. The second goal is to realize sustainable long-term funding for Flagstaff's open space system. So there's just, I think, the one strategy that we've identified, strategy 2.1, to explore and articulate funding recommendations to key partners to obtain sustainable long-term funding for the section. So that is it in a very brief overview. So do you have anything else you want to add?
No. Kept it short and sweet.
Yeah, so we're looking today for feedback on goals or strategies or any of the action items to that, and I'll take away.
Yeah, I'll start the conversation, I guess. Overall, I really like the length and how it's laid out. But there was one thing that I was thinking that maybe I'd like to see a vision section right before the goals and strategies. Maybe a really condensed version from the original strategic plan. Because I think that this, if we lay out the vision for, the strategic plan and for the Open Spaces Commission, these strategies dovetail right into seeing that vision, pushing that vision forward. And when you look back at the original vision, I have a couple of ideas how to condense it. I can talk to Sylvia, or we can talk about it now, but just to basically show what our vision is and then the strategies that will make that vision come to life.
I'll tag on to that idea a little bit. And I was unclear because I was remote last month. I was unclear, as this was pared down, if this was indeed an entire paring down of that whole 22, 23 page document, or if this was a replacement of chapter 3. And as I went through and I compared where things got edited down, and I looked at all the things that were in that original strategic plan, I just felt there was a lot of value in retaining those other chapters, not so much as what we're working on, but just as informational, as the comings and goings of people on the committee. And there was just such valuable information to me when I started looking through this strategic plan when we began this in November, December. I thought the vision was important, the definitions, the existing conditions of the sites. The appendix was really helpful. I saw that the map got added in on that first round of edits. I found that helpful. So I was wondering if, there was any consideration or discussion in making this 2-page reduction a replacement of chapter 3 within the original document. That was my thought.
And I think that part of the discussion last time was that a strategic plan is more kind of like a blueprint or kind of an idea document that hits the high points, and a lot of that stuff might fit better in a master plan or some other type of information, that strategic plan is not really, for most strategic plans that at least that I've seen, don't go into a whole lot of detail. It's left for something else,
Which makes sense. I just wouldn't want to lose that information and then that follow.
Very important information. But I think, I don't want to speak for the whole commission, but I thought the feeling was that the strategic plan should be just pare it down to a couple of pages.
And I think that part was really, I mean, kudos to you, Sylvia, for editing it down. I'm an editor, I was an editor, I know how hard it is to edit things shorter, and that was amazing work, so, yeah, I think that definitely checked that box.
Any other commissioners have any feelings? I think you brought up originally the paring it down into the
I
something we can handle better.
I had some issues, so it sounds much harsher than it is. As I looked at the document, I looked at some of the material in here, some of the goals and strategies are really seem really outside the control of the commission. And as I looked at some of the activities, it seemed like some of these were clearly part of the role of the commission as I see it. And others are larger issues for the entire section that addresses open space issues. Strategy 1.3, replace the loss of Schultz Creek natural area. That's what others did. And then the performance measure is replacement of the 20 acres of designated open space. It's really out of our control. And to say that that's the performance measure for the commission just doesn't seem, I mean, we're not going to get fired probably for not meeting it. But it just didn't seem like a match, because we're more of an advisory rather than an actual operation component. And then that came up a couple of times. And then more specifically for strategy 1.3, replace the loss of Schultz Creek natural area. I would like, counter to what I just said, but I'd like to expand that a little bit and make it not so specific for Schultz Creek natural area. But the first thing would be to assess really what was lost there. And then try to identify areas that will help meet that loss, rather than just make the assumption that we have to replace the Schultz Creek natural area. Maybe we don't. Maybe there's other ways of achieving that particular goal.
I could add to what you said. It's like, yeah, I want to have it more open space in the city of Flagstaff. And I think we try to see, that's why working with the other entities, society, with the community development and planning, zoning, park and rec, and housing development. But the one that we already lost, that's the one that we really have to give priority to replace it in the first place. And yes, others are just as important, but this is already happening. So, and I don't want to lose that.
Is there a question of, are we trying to replace acreage, or are we trying to place a like site? You know, I mean, what's the goal there, you know?
That's exactly what I wrote down. Maybe it could be reworded to reassess functionality of the Schultz Pass natural area.
Okay.
That's a much broader.
Right.
So using what we can that's left of that site that didn't get taken by the drainage basins. There was a bit of a trail left there, correct? Or access to a potential trail? Is that?
We're working on, with the Forest Service and Stormwater to try to provide access through the detention basin area or the Forest Service. So there is a staging area there. The community is already using that as parking. And so we anticipate that will continue. And then We also have a neighboring property identified that could be used to, I think the commission was involved actually in the 2004 bond fund review of those priorities. And so there's a neighboring property that's identified as a priority. Could be used to expand the trailhead.
So it's property right next to the Schultz Creek.
Yeah.
Got it.
So in that case, hearing for, saying it, we just have to rewording, and Bruce basically that's saying that, rewording that what the strategy 1.3.
Yeah, I think it's important to, that Schultz Creek natural area has been on the books for so long. And it fits in with the goal.
Can you share that wording you had again now?
What I had was, I've added an action item that said, assess what was lost from Schultz Creek natural area, parentheses, function and asset. As an activity, and then figure out what the other city property is.
Well, as a, yeah, it falls between the strategy and the action item. What I had was reassess functionality of the parcel. For possible use. I don't have to word, but possible use. We had a vision of how it might be used. And so reassess how that vision might be readjusted. To use the area.
As we get into the kind of the specifics, there was on strategy 1.1, action item number 4, it says update the prioritized land and trail acquisition list. And in our previous versions, which kind of fell under like strategy 3.2 or 3.3, depending on which version that you looked at, some of those sites were listed, parcels south of the I-40, the Walnut Canyon State Land Section, the Center Parcel Observatory Mesa, View Shed, Rio Flag areas. That list that's there, I would like to see that carried over so we don't lose track of the ones that were really our high targets. And then also, I guess, also that would be the number 2 on that, the identify gaps in Flagstaff's trail network in collaboration with Flagstaff's trail initiative and rate them in accordance of priority, which is an ongoing thing, but just gave a little bit of specifics and a detailed list that I thought would be helpful. So if this shortened version becomes the actual strategic plan itself, all the other parts of the previous strategic plan and all that documentation and follow-up and definitions, where will that end up landing?
That's a great question. I don't know. We can create an appendix for this too, and then stick any like material in there that seems appropriate. Your suggestion, Commissioner Norton, about just replacing chapter 3 with this could also be the one that we could keep the rest of the content of the strategic plan if we found that was helpful.
And this obviously chapter 3 is the bulk of the strategic plan anyway. I don't know that.
Yeah. Or I don't know if most people do this with strategic plans, but there could be just like a immediate priority cover page, and it could be like these 2 pages, and then you could keep the rest of the strategic plan. That was more to the commission's liking.
I think it was Bruce Applin that suggested the 1-page strategic plan last time, and he's not here this time. Um, um, My guess is he'd be more comfortable with having this be the strategic plan with some of the changes that you made. And then having the other things be appendices.
And that
Yeah.
would work too. I mean,
So
they
it's all
would be,
available to like.
right, it would be available.
Commission.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways that information shouldn't be lost. It
Right, right,
takes a lot of time and effort to get that.
yes.
We place it, so we have a strategic plan and then sort of a master plan and then a really operational plan. Specific projects, okay, Schultz Creek functionality, that's the lowest level, just in hierarchy, not in terms of importance. And then the bulk of those now, strategic plan, middle level master plan, but outline how to make this happen.
Mhm.
I just stole the master plan from somebody else.
Well, and I say that, under the goals and strategy, goal one, strategy 1.1 is to collaborate and create a comprehensive open space master plan for Flagstaff. So, one of the strategies to create our strategic plan is to create a master plan as well. So, putting part of this, in what you were saying, and then doing the appendices kind of makes sense. You say not to lose any of the information, but I think for me anyway, just speaking for myself, I like the strategic plan itself being smaller and then, 2 pages or 2.5 or whatever it ends up being. But keeping the strategic plan itself compact, basically getting the ideas across quickly and all the other details can be added. Master plan or in the existing document that we have.
I think there was a suggestion last time, taking the content and using it for the section's strategic plan and some of those steps would more in line with city duties. And the section does actually have to go through the period of re-updating their strategic plan. So we can capture some of that great information for that update. But in the meantime, I heard that we don't want to lose anything too. So, that document's not going away. We're not going to delete it or something like that. So, if we want, we can either include it in an appendix, or if there's something that's not included in the current 2-pager, we can build it out too. If we need to.
Maybe the solution is for now, for this year, or this 18-month period that this strategic plan would be in effect, is we take all that information and make an appendix. When a master plan is created, we import that over and separate it out, and then we'd have it all.
That seems great to me.
And I think one of the important parts is make sure that not only we keep that information, but we keep the links, not literal HTTP links, but that information, not only it doesn't get lost, actually, it doesn't get lost in terms of access. Because what happens, I've seen too many strategic plans, you go into the closet, dark closet, there's a strategic plan that got put on the shelf and no one has touched it since. And so want to make sure it stays front and center of the operation commission section as guidance, and that it's a living document and not something that gets filed.
Yeah, in the past too, the commission has used the strategic plan for selecting their priorities, which then we try to tailor our future meetings kind of around those priorities. So we can continue to work on those. And that's kind of how we try to keep it in the forefront of guidance.
Think you
Yeah,
have
we have
enough information to
great
kind of
feedback.
revise and
Yeah.
we can take a look again next time.
Forward, because it needs to be voted.
So I did make this a decision item on the agenda, so we can retool it and bring it back and make it a decision item next month, if that's okay.
So,
Sure. Wait,
is part of the action here, make whatever corrections we decide on this, but also to rework what's remaining, it's not in chapter 3, so that it looks like a real appendix.
Yeah.
Some editing to make it look like a real appendix.
Yeah.
And not just chopped out.
I just-
So
yeah, we can do that. Take a look at it.
Yeah.
So just to make sure I capture the points, we're going to include the current strategic plan as an appendix item after we edit it, to make sure there's not a ton of overlap. There was a comment about the performance measures, and I just wanted to speak to that. I think last time the commission included performance measures on each of the strategies as a way of like, how do we assess like whether or not we were successful? So we don't necessarily need performance measures included, or if we wanted to retool those in some way to make them more appropriate, we can also do that as well. So I just want to see if there's any additional follow-up direction on that,
I personally think performance measures is a coup de grace. It's, you put all this thing down and you have these action items. But it comes a point where we've either done them or haven't done them. And this is 10 months down, and we look back. 10 months ago, we thought this was a good performance measure. Did we actually do something? Or maybe that performance measure was a little too aggressive. And we didn't do it, but we need to change. In other words, I think it's part of a small part of the strategic plan is not only to keep us focused, but to remind us that we haven't done it, or we have done it, or we've done it so far, and maybe we need to change something. So, but I looked at, for example, strategy 1.3, again, having to do with Shills Creek, the performance measure would be replacing 20 acres of designated open space. I don't think that is, I think Bruce made the point, and I agree that I don't think we will if we get 20 acres there. Get 5, might get 4. So I think maybe a performance measure is something like go for it.
Identify alternatives for replacing Schultz Creek natural area functionality.
Good.
Because I think my understanding of what that was it might not be retooling Schultz Creek natural area, but getting an entirely different natural area too.
Right, so we'll figure out what
Yeah.
did that 20 acres buy us? Crude terminology. What were the functions that area served, and then how do we replace that functionality? Right, be someplace else, maybe we just say, or we put it in pieces.
Yeah, I'm kind of on that board. What I was thinking is the word plans for Schultz. Where are the plans? Now, they weren't able to, but they were the idea, this is what we're trying to do. So how can we still try to do something like that? Is what, and that's the functionality part of it, is what I'm going to use for that. How do we get close to doing what we plan to do? I think it would work for that. And then,
I think even the two pager does address both of those things. We can address the functionality in this strategy. And then the open space system build out effect, I think does address like acquiring additional open space for the benefit of the community. So I think we can still accomplish both goals with this two pager.
you do have a feeling that you could acquire maybe 20 acres?
Oh, I don't know about that, but the open space system looks at acquiring other open space in the city,
Oh,
like.
but this is particularly Schultz Creek we're talking about.
That's what I guess I was saying, like, I think like the replacement of 20 acres probably doesn't fit well underneath this strategy. It fits
Oh,
like
yeah,
the
but
acquiring open space fits better like under the open space system. Maybe.
But I wonder if the performance measure is actually the action item number 4, make recommendations to Flagstaff City Council. Maybe that's the performance measure.
so that goes if the strategy 1.3 is reworded,
Yes.
and then yes, then that would be, yeah. That, would that make sense?
That makes sense.
That's of course unless that's gonna,
Buy the 20 acres.
that would be okay.
Best I can do is run around the perimeter. You know the story behind that? I mean, I was involved with that and really fought against it. This was 1987. And it was what we called kind of a business council on less environmentally interested in water. Flagstaff's got to grow it down. There was a realtor on there. I kept saying there's lots of, and remember this is in 87, so it's quite a lot of development since then. So there was quite a bit of land that the city owned. And her argument was, let's put it on the tax roll. Let's put it on the tax roll. And the council went with it. And so the city went and looked at all their lands, 7. And part of the lands was this 40 acres up there. That was city owned due to the history of the water and all of that development there. And this lady said, we don't need that land. It ought to be auctioned off. A lot of land was auctioned off. But we were able to convince them not to auction it all. And that's where the 20 acres came from. And that's why it was, it could make some logic because the other 20 acres were just contiguous, but just to the west, where all those big houses are. And I don't know if there was any wrangling going on or whatever, but those lots were subdivided. And, you know, and the other thing is, we didn't follow the argument put around the city tax roll because it was in the county. So that's the backstory.
And then the last clarifying question, it's okay, if I jump in. Oh, never mind, we already covered that.
So is it possible, kind of like what we did last for this one, see something that the commission need ahead of time or something, so it's a good chance to really look at it? Okay.
I would put it up on a Google Doc for y'all to make comments, but apparently that makes the meeting.
Interesting.
So,
I didn't know that.
yeah.
Don't reply to all.
Right.
And then I had on my list here of things to talk about. Do we want to start thinking about like what priority actions the commission wants to focus on over the remaining part of the year to work on? Based on these strategies and these goals, do we want to wait until next time to do that? And then, you know, if we select priority action items, what are the next steps? What's the homework that needs to be completed between meetings? And then what support do you need from Sylvia and myself and Sarah?
Well, I think we kind of, at the next meeting, community development department representatives will be here. That'll kind of kick us off. We'll be able to understand, ask some questions, find out really how much of a role and a voice can we expect to have from them, and that might give us some direction.
Idea how to work.
Yeah, how it's gonna work. You know, I think maybe another follow-up, and whether this is someone else coming in to talk with us, or whether it's, you know, one of us or a group of us talking to Tiffany Antal, the zoning code manager. I know they've been reworking the zoning code and, you know, getting an understanding of that too. And that might be another piece of the puzzle for our information or something for us to work on.
Yeah, I support that. We can do several things at once, I'm sure, but getting connected to PND and the planning department so that open space, not preferences, but open space themes can be put in front of them on a regular basis. They're not add-ons. They're part of the decision process. Oh, yeah, that's where it all starts, and once it gets past planning and zoning, it's time to go
And
down.
oftentimes, by the time it comes to us, it's already been discussed and determined.
Yeah.
So, you know, getting them, you know, the planners to remember that, you know, in addition to housing and affordable housing and climate initiatives, there's open space. Don't forget about open space. So.
Yeah, I'm just gonna ask Veronica, what do you think, from your perspective, given that, and what other things should we as a board, a commission, be thinking about and trying to help them with it?
Thanks for your question. I did look through these action items on the strategic plan and tried to identify what might be the most supportive for this section. And I think all the commissioners kind of talked about this last time too. So the ones that I highlighted as maybe being some of the top priorities were generate ideas for sustainable and permanent funding for the section. Because at this point, we're just operating with our base budget right now, so we don't have any funds besides what's left of the 2004 bond funds that we already have direction for to work towards building out the sustainable open space system. And so that could include like researching how other open space programs are funded and presenting the results to the commission and providing maybe our section with a recommendation of how we might fund the section in the future. And I actually, one of our other agenda items fell off, so I've asked Commissioner Chair Wilson to do a presentation of funding that he did for us while researching some of the city code items in open space. So that's the next agenda item. So he'll be talking about that a little bit. And then right along those lines, the commission was interested in updating city code about a year ago, and Commissioner Wilson worked on that as well. And so we could pick that item up and strengthen city code for open space. And that will require some additional legwork as well. And then the community development, the clarification of like how the open space can make recommendations for proposed developments was on the list. And I think this was I don't remember which goal this was listed under, but discovering how state property is listed for sale. That was a priority action item. And I know the city has bought state property in the past, and our open space system identifies key state pieces of property. And so developing a relationship with the state is something that needs to be done. I don't know.
There's a website, yeah, there's a website, you can see when they put things up for auction. Sometimes it's only within a couple of weeks of advance notice though, so it would be something, that's our only avenue to find out, constant monitoring of the website.
Those are the things that I thought. And then we talked about it before too, with the master plan development. We have some kind of like clear kind of outline for what we're trying to achieve over the section. I think that would be super helpful for providing our current section direction, and then also our colleagues in community development and other divisions.
One of the things that I had written down, from my angle on P and Z when developments have started to come our way is, I'm looking for maps of, where future foots are going and where, open spaces has been identified. And I'm using those bond maps, that you presented at city council last fall, or just the Foots Trail map of where potential, and I did have the opportunity to ask a developer in February, when they came with a plat, I see there's a future Foots Trail along Woody Mountain Road. Are you part of this? Or, well, no, it was going to be on the other side of the street. They weren't going to be a part of that. But just bringing those things up and constantly reminding these applicants that come forward, even if there's nothing to be done in it at that time, they at least know that we're watching and we're, but to have some kind of a, where I know I'm looking at the right maps, to ask the right questions, that would be helpful.
Yeah, and the commission's previous strategic plan did actually have like a visionary map for the open space system in there, and given the feedback today, we can include that in the appendix as we move forward. And I don't know if that provides the detail that we need, however, for having a conversation like that. But it does kind of have paint a very broad stroke picture of like what we wanted to achieve as a community that the commission helped us create in the past. And since the creation of that document, we've taken that document internally and tried to make it a little bit more specific to actually help us provide guidance for the future. And that's how, that's what we used to help the commission provide recommendations for the remaining 2004 bond fund expenditure. So
an update with that, basically.
yes, yeah, that's something that's internal, it's more specific.
And if I ever had a question, if something was coming our way, and I call you, say, but so far I've kind of just poked around at the maps that are available. But
Yeah, I can send that kind of visionary map again to all the commissioners to look at. It's something where I can actually put it up on the screen now. Something fun to look at as far as the vision for the community. And then I do see the opportunity for in the development of our master plan to come up with something that's a little bit more specific than that, but not super specific to this.
And how much longer do those bond funds and that acquisition plan run? Like, is that just always something within the works?
No, there's a limit.
There's a
The
time.
funds have to be spent. I don't think there's a expiration of the funds for state, but I think our finance department would like us to spend them sooner rather than later. So,
Okay.
yeah. Let me see if I can find that vision.
If we were ever to go out looking for more bond funds, I mean, that's what we've got you've got money from 2004 that you still haven't spent, so what, and then you go out and try to get more. So,
What we have left is fairly limited.
yeah.
Is that the money that was used for, Victoria Mesa, that same bond?
Yeah, part of the Victoria said, yeah, the 2004 bond fund was used to purchase Picture Canyon and leveraged with state
And how
grants.
much is left in it?
So,
How much is left in it?
I forget right off the hand. I want to say like like just a little over 2 million.
Is that, oh,
I think so. We've worked with Mark on this slide, and he's identified, or he's let us use $1 million of that for open space initiatives. So we've been working really closely with Mark to move forward with that. And then a good portion of that really needs to be spent on foots easements, since the bond was identified for that purpose as well.
so we do have a little money.
We do in there, and we did go through a process now before you were on, where we identified priorities and ranked the priorities and come up with a list
That,
that has gone to city council for new ordinance approval. And they have given us the green light to move forward on that. And so we are slowly working on that.
okay,
So we have identified priorities for the remaining portion of that.
Where could new kids access?
Yeah, I'm happy to pull up that down as well, or put it on a future agenda maybe, so we can chat about that. And then I'll have to look at when we made a presentation to council. I don't recall what the detail was, but I could send you the meeting link. You can watch
I
it.
might have that
Oh.
information, because I snagged it from the city council meeting
Yeah.
where you did your presentation.
That would be great.
Yeah.
So
we have to be
just
brought up to speed.
for fun, since we're talking about the strategic plan, this was created with the help of the Open Spaces Commission once before as like a visionary map. And we've updated this somewhat internally, so this is not fully built out, but you can kind of see like the blue lines were identified as being like open space priorities as corridors between our regional reserves. And then there are some additional like blue squares that are included here as like additional open space. And then I have an updated version of this kind of visionary map that I can share, and that the commission is more than welcome to adopt for the strategic plan as well, if they feel like that's appropriate.
Robert, I saved all your stuff on September 25th, so I don't know if that was the date of the council
That sounds
meeting, but it was
about right.
around that time.
Okay, thanks for that. That'll help. Okay, I'm gonna switch screens here, unless you're still looking at that. Yes, I'll find the other one here.
First version of that happens. Right in this room with a bunch of magic markers and big that.
For a map like that, as you're looking at it, years ago and even recently, when we talked about open space, one of the feedback is we don't need any, we're surrounded by it. Without going into the detail, I'm thinking maps like this should have an outline of what is water service land, what is water service land, public lands. Because it's an important thing to realize and makes it really clear that, well, within the city limits, we need open space. Because not everybody lives on the border, not everybody has access to the outside. But by having it on the map, it kind of moderates that kind of argument against open space within the city limits. Yes, we have it, but we can't get to it.
And there's no guarantee all that Forest Service land will stay forever.
Well, there's no guarantee of that either, but
Oh, I could talk about that subject for a while. So, but I'll refrain from that, but I totally agree, yeah, that, and that is something that we're thinking about with our 10-minute walking access goal that we
Yeah.
try to
Right.
provide within a 10-minute walk, quarter mile of,
Just red line places where you can't get to it.
you know. So this is we built off the map that the commission helped us make. You see, so this looks a little different than the one we just looked at. And the lines up here are for the urban trail system. And so we have Picture Canyon over here in the east. Here's McMillan Mesa, of course, Buffalo Park, which Parks manages, and then Observatory Mesa over here in the west. This is Fort Tut Hill down here in the south. So we're kind of thinking about, you know, how we can connect these regional preserves with corridors using the existing foots and some existing and potentially new alignments as well. And then, you know, in the south part of Flagstaff, we don't really have an open space property there. And so that was identified by the commission as like a priority area somewhere south in the southeastern quadrant of Flagstaff. And so these big blue squares that you see here are state property currently that we just have identified as potential open space for the community. And that the regional plan also identifies as potential open space currently. There is one additional state property right here that you can see that we've identified for some, you know, for some urban trails. However, the regional plan does identify that for future development, so we did not identify it for open space because of that purpose. So this is just very visionary.
One other point on this map, I see a lot of those lines are squiggly because a lot of those follow watersheds. There's a flag and its tributaries. And I think that's an important point to make in our open space is that we know what happens if we build and put from watershed areas, keeping a lot of these in open space, more than just preserving the open space. Say, the cost reduction measure. In some ways, some pretty cheap insurance.
Yeah, this map was what the floodplains were taking into consideration in the development of it.
Those two sections on the southeast side, I remember quite a few years ago, the argument for considering those being saved or taken out of the state land was protection of the Walnut Canyon area rather than open space for the city of Flagstaff.
Yeah, I believe the National Park Service did a review of those two parcels to see if it held national significance. And upon their review, it was determined that it did not meet those standards. So they were not protected through that happening.
Yes, I'm just saying that the history is not that. I think it probably predates this map, that those two sections were argued by folks in that area.
Yeah.
For that purpose, but not as open space for Flagstaff. I mean, it would serve that too, but I mean, that's not what the argument for raising those two parcels to the forefront. So I guess what I'm saying is, I'm not so sure it would be part of a map that open space is really interested in acquiring.
Yeah. I think the reason that they're all on there is not because I think it was like if we could acquire one of these, that would be, you know. But I think the one that probably would serve the community the best is the most western one. It's closest to development.
also an area where regional park might be best placed. In this silence, could I ask, again, the newbies, what ways can the commissioner help you as both an individual as a group? I mean, we can help as a sounding board. But maybe, for example, can we go out and research things for you or this or that, and is that useful or not useful? Because the city has a way of doing it, and kind of things they want, but the individual might dig up stuff that's not very useful. I'm just trying to get a feeling of how I, if anybody, here, chief of this, would be useful just by showing up and letting us know. But I'm just a person.
Yeah, there are lots of things I think that could be useful. Thanks for the question. When we went through that process of identifying the priorities for the remaining funds of that 2001 fund, we did have commissioners that went out and did the field work for us, taking the pictures and making sure that the rest of the commission had all the information on the parcels that we were looking at. And that saved me from a lot of like field work. So that was really great. I know Commissioner Wilson did some of that. So, I also think like being eyes and ears of the community about what the community wants and making those recommendations back to the program. If you see a decent property that's not yet developed or minimally developed, that would be really important for their open space system. I think knowing about that, bringing that back to the commission, letting them know, and we could add it to our priority list. Not that we could purchase it, but we could certainly look at it. I think doing initial research sometimes can be super helpful. We've been currently researching other communities and their master plans right now, so we're learning about how other communities are preparing their master plans and in that process. I think we've been asking questions about funding and these programs too. So you have ideas along those lines. I think that could be important. In fact, I think the commission originally created a strategic plan partially to help guide them in supporting us, in addition to just being like a recommendation. I shouldn't say in addition to help them, to help guide them in the recommendation process. So the commissioners were focused on how to provide support. I don't know if that really directly answers your question.
Please let us know, like as you find things that, you need assistance with.
And I think, for me, I think the goal about ongoing secure funding is probably the most important thing, because like we can have a list of great open space properties till the cows come home, but if we have the money to buy them. And as far as I can tell, any other open space program that is funded by taxes of some kind started as a citizens initiative.
I don't know if we're ready to go into that part of your agenda, but
It's a great transition.
noticing that other states rely on, tax money, whereas Arizona doesn't, but that kind of speaks to what we deal with here in this state. Is the only time that something open space oriented has been put on a ballot is that 2004 bond initiative? Have they ever voted on
It was brought forward to council who, I forget the year it was, but it was brought to council to do that, and they declined to put it on the ballot.
A tax portion?
Right.
Okay.
So it has been tried,
I
but
think
that doesn't mean we can't try again.
Yeah, that's right.
And there was
Kind of,
Proposition
yeah.
413, which is what
Yeah.
made McMillan Mesa.
Yes.
a natural
Okay.
area.
Rebecca?
Could I just clarify? Hi, everyone. I'm Rebecca. Sorry to hop in late. I did just want to clarify that phosphor or the sales tax request that went to city council. Council declined to put it on the ballot themselves as a city council, but they encouraged the group bringing that forward to do a citizen petition, much like Prop 413. So it wasn't that there wasn't support, that council had other priorities like transportation tax for that ballot. And they encouraged the group to go through the citizens piece, and they chose not to.
Didn't get any traction.
The group wasn't interested in going that route.
So I guess that we kind of taken care of item B then and move on to the next one. The open space funding options. This also is an informational discussion item. So, you have a couple of words first, or just
Well, I appreciate you stepping up to do a presentation for us. Mike, Commissioner Wilson, brother, did some research for us about a year ago on a city code and what was inclusive for open space. So that has been an area of thought and concern and a priority for the commission in the past for updating our code. So he did a lot of research on other communities and how they have written their code to be inclusive of open space. And in that process, you did a little bit of research about how some communities are funding their open space programs as well. So I think you're going to speak to that.
yeah. So
Can I share one of your documents?
yeah,
Okay.
Okay, got it. So in looking at the city codes for different cities, part of that was part of the information that I got from there was the size of their open space and parks departments and funding, that the mechanism for funding for those particular cities. Of course, it's not an inclusive list, but these are the ones that I had looked at the time. So I pulled this information from that research, and basically it's a bunch of bullet points just to get you thinking about the funding aspect of open space. And one thing also I might mention is that not all of these cities consider open space separately. They could be part of a Parks and Recreation department, and so they're not called out specific. Open space is not called out specifically, but these are the funding mechanisms for these particular cities. And as you go down this list, like Albuquerque, it's 29,000 acres of open space and parks, and they use an open space trust fund. So they've created a trust fund that will fund their open space. Aurora, Colorado. Colorado is kind of different because they use their lottery money to give back to the counties, and then the counties in turn provide money to the cities and municipalities for open space and recreation. And what real kind of interest was the funding for Aurora, Colorado, because they have a share back program with the county where 50% of the revenues that they get from the state are used for open space purchase, acquisitions, maintenance, and it's actually broken down into different percentages. 20% for acquisitions. I think it's 10% for maintenance, and so they have a quite nice funding mechanism. Boulder, they use sales tax revenues, bond issues, private donations, but they also are getting money from the county property taxes and state lottery. So, that's a little bit different. Colorado Springs, they use sales tax to fund their open space. In Durango, they have actually written into the city code is a section creating a segregated and restricted fund for the open space. Flagstaff, as Robert said, primarily is city general fund and grants when you could get them. Fort Collins, just one interesting thing I saw was 14% of the city is actually dedicated to natural areas. That has nothing to do with funding, but I just thought it was quite interesting. But they have used city and county sales tax, ballot measures. There's another city in Colorado where they use sales tax, property taxes, lottery funds, grants. Even the little, Marana, they don't have a large parks and open space, natural areas, in the city, but they use general funds, they use development impact fees, and also they get a portion of their transportation bond fund is actually given back to them. Prescott has a sales tax, but it's only expended on acquisitions. It's not used for maintenance. Maintenance has to come elsewhere. Sedona uses a city general fund, and Tucson, they approved a bond measure, $225 million to fund their system. And they're approximately, their open space area is approximately the same size as ours, about 3,000 acres. So that's those are kind of the specifics of the cities that I was looking at as far as city codes and what I was able to get out as far as the size of their, their open space and how these particular ones do their funding. But I also looked, if you don't have you don't have anything to share on this, but I also looked at just in general other places that fund their open space and parks through donations. They create, I'm not sure how all of this works exactly, but Greenway foundations, corporate personal giving, of course, grants, facility improvement benefit and benefit districts, developer contributions, developers cash and lieu fees, adopt a trail programs, to fund the trail system. And those are kind of external funding sources, but there's also internal funding, such as the sales tax. Some cities use franchise fees for utility right-of-ways for their open space. Stormwater utility fees, dedicated taxes specifically for open space. Parks, open space, bond issues, transient, BBB taxes. Some cities do use those that funding mechanism. Solid waste fees. There's a whole list of ways that different cities around the country are funding their open space. And also the tax incremental financing, creating a TIF district. you know, which provides incremental increases in property taxes. Now, whether that's good or bad, you know, that's one of the ways that some cities are funding their open space. So there's a lot of different ways to look at it. It's just whatever makes sense for Flagstaff, you know. Also, you know, some of these things, I'm not sure whether even you can do in Arizona. You know, so there has to be more research, you know, done to see what makes the most sense for Flagstaff. But what I mean, it looks like there's lots of ways to provide funding. It's just finding the right one for us, or several, I guess.
Something that you said in your list there about stormwater utility fees. And of course, council just voted to increase those to the maximum on their grid to pay for all of it without counting in, you know, grants and state funding that may come their way to cover all of that. So let's say maybe if some of that grant money and state money and all that does come through, there may be an excess there. There may be an opportunity, since Schultz Creek went to stormwater mitigation, that we could advocate for using some of that excess money, should there be any, to replace our open space.
And I think when I was looking at that, and specifically, I think it was Houston, if I remember right, they tax their stormwater fee and use that to pay for retention basins, replenishing, you know, in their case, their bayous and stuff, and things like that. And, you know, so I think that, you know, those are things that are possible, you know, and do fit with the stormwater, you know,
Because
stuff, you know,
we
stormwater.
gave 20 acres
Yeah,
to
and
stormwater mitigation.
Right,
Is there some compensation
you know, and
payback, you know, available to us?
providing just in general, you know, natural protection for the waterways, you know, through the city, you know, so. Yeah, that's.
Which is the stormwater mitigation.
Yes. Yeah. So there's a lot to chew on. So it's kind of, I don't know where you would like to go from here. That's, you know, I can provide you that other additional. If you want. Share.
So my mind's running here.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna say, who would like, you know, our council liaison, I don't think she's with us at the moment, but I mean, who would we make aware that should additional funding be coming to the city for stormwater mitigation, to please consider funding, you know, returning some funds or something to open spaces, since 20 acres went to stormwater mitigation, to plant that seed. Do we write a letter from the commission? Do we talk to, you know, do we talk to our council liaison? How do we maybe get that little ball rolling?
I don't know.
That's a political question.
I know.
I was gonna see how Roger chose to respond to that. Sandy immediately looked my way. Yeah, I think you can approach that in a number of ways. I would caution for now, like, let's maybe see if some of those grants come in or not
Sure.
before we start planting that seed. I think right now, those conversations were so energy intensive for our council that maybe let's let the dust settle a little bit, but then eventually, if that is what the commission would like to recommend, then you could write a letter that would go through our city manager and then be presented to council.
Okay.
That you are an advisory commission for the council, if that's that's a recommendation that you would like to formally make to them, that's how we would do it.
We're gonna keep track of that.
I wrote it down, that's a good idea.
I have a question. Does the city have a grant proposal position? Who would write proposals? Who looks for a grant? Who would write proposals? Is it internal to us or is there a section of the city that does that kind of thing?
We do have a grants and contracts office that keep track of all of our grants and reporting and whatnot. Stacy Bruckman Eggs, is the manager for that department. But we do all of our grant writing in our internal team here, street. And then that goes to grants and contracts for their review and approval. And then if we, and then it goes to city council as well for review. Permission to submit to that and then to apply the funds.
Next steps.
Not much more, thanks to that. Did you want to share your other document?
Maybe next time. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Any other comments?
Anything else on this? Any other specific cities that, we should look at or, I'll give this other list to Robert so he can send out to everybody all the other, funding options or funding mechanisms that I found that weren't necessarily specific to the cities that I was looking at the time. And I guess we can have a discussion about all that.
Yeah.
Maybe other people have other ideas of funding mechanisms that might work for us.
About, any portion of if, let's back up. Supposedly, there is verbiage being created on an ordinance with regard to permitting short-term rentals. There's a little bit of a revenue stream there, like $250 a year, I think, on each short-term rental. Is there any piece of that that we might ask for? Just trying to think of new little windfalls that are in the works.
People that use the short-term rentals, they're using open space and,
I mean, that it's not, nothing's come forward yet that council has only given input to staff on what they'd like to see in the ordinance. We're really kind of behind the ball of all the other Arizona cities in getting an ordinance in effect, but it will be coming.
So, I think our last meeting, maybe one of the commissioners asked for an overview of funding and budgetary processes, and I think that was more kind of overview of internal, like our internal budget. That is on my list to provide for a future agenda item, but perhaps we can make it more broad discussion and ask some questions about funding if we have staff available for that. So if you wanted to come up with some ideas and ask some questions about that, that might be a good future agenda item.
Yeah, or, like, this is all great information, and like you made a point, how do we know what would work in Arizona or work in Flagstaff? How do we get down to that nitty gritty information?
But do you have any other comments or thoughts on having that as a future agenda item,
The budget in general or that specific?
of making it like a more broad conversation with someone like Rick Chatter to talk about funding options for open space.
We have had Rick come and talk to the commission over the years. I know that there are several new members here that may or may not have seen that presentation. You know, he does a good job at explaining geo bonds and how those may or may not be used for, general obligation bonds, and how you pay those back and, you know, maybe he could do that, but I think this is something that this commission struggles with and has for years, right? And it's a tricky one for us as staff to provide recommendations on as well, but it's also tricky for the commission to come up with, I mean, you're coming up with great, like, outside of the box ideas, which I appreciate. It's just that there are so many needs in the city that, like the new revenue streams that you just mentioned, I'm sure that they already have an idea for what they should spend those on, right? So, yeah, it's tricky. I mean, certainly Rick could give a good overview. I think my vision of the budget, the overall budget presentation that Robert is planning to give later will really help you dive in and understand what is in our O&M budget, what's in our staffing budget, what's in our, we are seeing finally some decent revenues in our BBB recreation funds that help fund parks and recreation. We are now parks, recreation, open space and events. So I'm kind of pushing that envelope a little bit, you know, to see once we start building up really good capacity and get some parks and rec priorities taken care of that have been on the priority list for 20 years, does that start to open up some options for open space as well? I think it does. I mean, there's definitely synergy there. We have similar goals like the 10-minute access and all of that for our communities. So I know I'm not really answering your question, but you know, I do think that presentation, and I can work with you, Robert, on that budget presentation. We can give you kind of a higher level. Even looking at that BBB recreation 5-year plan, I'd be happy to go over that with you. Just so you can start to learn about how much revenue are we talking about and what are the parks and rec priorities and how might those start to morph into pros priorities, including you all in the future. But in terms of like ongoing funding, I think the commission needs to think about, are your priorities acquisition of more land? Or are they an ongoing funding source besides general fund for maintenance? Or maybe adding trails and then maintenance. I think where we're struggling right now with our funding is in the maintenance side of things. Now, Robert and Sylvia and the team have done incredible with grants that are basically, and with volunteers, that are frankly doing all of our maintenance activities for us for the most part. So, you know, we've got great success there. We can certainly continue it. But when we do that budget presentation, we'll be able to show you kind of, and I think it would help you to see all of the grants. Like, we're doing our budget presentation tomorrow and just seeing the list of all the grants that open space has is phenomenal. I'd love for you all to get a holistic picture of that as well. So I know I'm not really giving you guidance or answering the question directly, but I do think that we have more information coming that will help you continue these conversations. Hopefully that was helpful.
Thanks for that.
Quick question, I mean, would it be possible, I mean, if it comes to, Rick being able to, or not, is there a way to find what is possible even, for some of these items, funding mechanisms can we do, can we even do them? And if we can't, we need to, just strike it from that, why do the research on something we can't do? I don't know, is there a way that
Yeah,
I
Rick
can
would,
provide that list?
Rick would definitely be able to help you with that. I think, our planning partners would as well. So we've got, Alex and Michelle from our planning department, planning to come at some point in the near future. They could talk about, and I think it would be a separate agenda item, Robert, but they could talk about impact fees. And for the state of Arizona, where can those, and what the process is, if you wanted to make a recommendation to city council, if open space is even an opportunity there. I know Parks and Recreation is, and our council in the past has chosen to focus on fire department and I can't remember, but it's not Parks and Recreation, I can tell you that. So, yeah, I just don't know if open space is even a possibility in the state of Arizona for things like that.
So, but just,
But they can help us with that.
just give Robert the list.
Yeah, we can start like checking them off or bringing you more information on the possibilities.
This is a little bit of an aside, but a few of the things that she said reminded me of a question that I had or something that I didn't put it in my notes. Back to those strategic plans, there was nothing in there about signage and facilities, amenities at the sites. We did a little bit of work on that last year. We're talking about signage at McMillan Mesa, things like that. Is that just not in that top priority tier
I
or?
think we moved it over to our
Okay.
strategic plan.
Okay,
The sections.
okay, thanks.
All right, so wrapping this item up. The reports and updates. The council representative here. Planning and zoning commission report.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to report for this meeting. In February, one of the P&Z meetings was canceled. And our March agendas aren't posted yet. I kind of touched a little bit earlier, the one meeting that we did have in February, I was able to, kind of inquire about a Foots Trail and ask questions and, just bring it up. And that's, kind of what I'll continue to do unless there's something that there's further to discuss or something that we need to advocate for in a bigger way. And I'm looking forward to having the community development representatives, Michelle and Alex, here next month. That's it.
All right, thank you. Next one is the open space management report.
I have limited updates as well today. We are working on some of the 2004 bond expenditure priorities that we talked about today. The Observatory Mesa Trail Plan is updated and we're just waiting for contract approval to move forward to our next step to do community outreach and stakeholder meetings. So once we have that, that'll begin very soon. Robert, I'm sorry, what trail? Observatory Mesa, natural area. Yep, the trail plan that we've been working on for that is ready to go as soon as we get it approved for our contract. Yeah, those are the two updates.
Question on the Observatory Mesa, have you made any progress on access parking?
Yes, we added an access point coming in from the lower Coconino. So starting at the end of the cul-de-sac though, since there's no room for a foot trail along the street, and because there's no room for a foot trail along the street in that section, we have not put that additional parking on it. So it would just be like a neighborhood access point coming in, but that would require 2 developers per, which one we already have an easement for, but the adjusted easement, the easement, and then a little observatory. Which has so that'll be added.
And how, that's great, progress there. How about, a major parking access? As far as, up on the base of the, Forest Ridge, is it?
515, the
Yeah.
Forest Road.
Yeah,
Yeah, so the plan at this point has identified 3 access points. The major one, it would be just just west of where the new public works facility is for services. Near where the city-owned property of McAllister Ranch is located. So we would be working with Parks to provide some type of parking there, because that area is also identified for a regional park. That would be the main access point for like folks around town, things like that, that want to use the Mesa. And then we have in the plan to work potentially with Lowell Observatory to provide an ADA accessible point on their property with approval from them, of course. But that's how we would like to provide access to adaptive mountain biking and ADA trails that are planned. And then the last kind of access point would be on the west side of 515, where we could accommodate like equestrian use, like to drive in, park. That would be like a graded area on natural area within the national boundary. Did I address your question?
yeah, I'm just thinking about an access area on the east side of the Observatory Mesa. Probably,
Well, we have Thorpe Park,
yeah,
which is currently an access point.
yeah.
And the reason we have been examining additional access is because Thorpe Park is so busy in the summertime. It's just when you go from, when there's a ball game there, there's no parking there.
Is there
But
any,
that is currently.
well, it's not on the,
That's okay. It's in our reports. I think we can chat about it.
I'm just thinking of the northwest corner. The road that comes, road that comes from.
Yeah, I should be that way.
No,
Northwest.
northwest corner,
Oh, you mean going to like,
come A1. Yeah, overpass, whatever it is, the road that comes up there. It hits the corner of the property.
A1 Mountain Road.
Yeah,
let me open the map real quick and quick take a look at it.
I could see that as a place for users who plan to be up there for several hours or something like that. Make it move and driving the whole.
This is not a map from the plan. This is just a general map, but you're talking about this general facility up here, the northwest.
I think it's the lower,
Okay, so down here.
no, it's the left-hand section and the upper left-hand corner.
How can I move around?
And then.
There we go. This section here.
Yeah, is that the A1 road? No.
No, A1 Mountain comes in and intersects the observatory or our natural area, like right here where this
Yeah,
plus is.
that's what I'm talking about.
Yes, so we would use the existing Forest Service road.
Yeah.
To provide access to this part of the natural area.
Yeah.
Right inside the boundary, This is the project that I was referring to as far as like the graded parking area.
Yeah.
We would provide like a small dirt graded, maybe, maybe surface or
Yeah.
something like that for folks to park right there.
Yeah.
And mainly, we're thinking about this because technically, you can have equestrian traffic on a Foots trail.
Yeah.
So this would be like an equestrian access
I'd be
point
able
for
to
understanding
do that too, yeah. But I could see it as but for the diehards that really want to go up there and either ride or run.
Yeah.
They would take the time to come to A1, go and come up there.
Yeah.
And even groups. So I see that as one that would maybe not be used a lot in terms of individuals, but each individual use of it might be quite a group of people. Or horse trailers, as you say.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah,
I am a member of the public, have a comment. Go ahead, Diane. Yeah.
Can you hear me? Hello.
Yes.
I hear you.
Yeah, I haven't heard anyone mention continuing to access the Observatory Mesa land across the Lowell Observatory. There's many trails and jeep tracks across what they call the back 40 that have been used by people for over 20 years now that are very much enjoyed. And it's only by accessing the Mesa from the south side, once you get up onto the top, that you actually get to enjoy those lovely views across town and across to the edge of the Mogollon Rim. So is there going to be some a collaboration agreement reached with Lowell so people can continue to access those trails from their parking lot?
Thanks for the question. We have been working with Lowell to draft a plan that is inclusive of some of their property. That would include ADA accessibility and general walking trails as well. So we do not have an agreement with Lowell as of yet, so that's still in the process of coming up with an agreement to move forward.
Okay, thanks. I'm so glad it's on the agenda because, like I say, that's been enjoyed for a long time, and it is still now. It's one of the few places where you can actually walk from downtown up the hill and access the city property, across and behind the Lowell. There is that other place in that dark corner, the northwest end of Thorpe Park. But that takes you like right to the backside. You don't have any expansive views from there. I, along with other people, have been concerned about this issue for a long time. And there was a lot of public support for, Lowell not to be given full ownership of that property up there a couple of years ago. So I do hope that will be kept on access, will be kept on the agenda in that area.
Thanks for your comment.
Thank you.
So did you have anything else on the report and side of things?
Just that we are hosting a guided archaeology hike of Picture Canyon on Sunday, March 26th at 1 p.m. Peter Pillis will be our archaeological guide for that. And we are doing another full moon hike next Tuesday, March 7th. At 5:30 p.m. We will leave from Buffalo Park, but we will do McMillan Mesa Loop Trail.
Did you have a number of people who liked?
We had 36 people come to the last one.
Wonderful.
Yeah, it's a little like, wow.
And where did you walk them? Because I had been to.
We went around Buffalo Park.
Yeah, that was
Not all 36 finished.
Yeah, I had been there 2 days before and I thought, how are they gonna hike out here?
Yeah. I will be going out and doing a recon of the trails the day before, so I can let people know what to expect.
Thanks for doing that. I enjoy seeing that.
Yeah.
And did you have anything on the open space status report?
That, I sorry, I forgot to take that up again. That was last week or last month.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't have anything.
Okay, good. There any other informational items to and from the commissioners and staff? Is there anything that you want to bring up and or share with the commission? It's just informational.
Well, I just noticed that 3 of us, our term ends in April. Do we reapply or what happens?
Yeah, reapply. I think the clerk's office usually recommends that you apply within like a month of when your position is up, and then your application will be submitted to the city council for
Is there a
review.
place on the homepage where we can go to apply, or is it advertised, or how do we know?
Yep, I will send you all the link.
Okay.
Yeah.
The other thing is it's Nat, not Nate.
Where is it, Ms. Dunn?
Term expiration.
So it's on the roster. Okay. Okay.
Anything else? All right, item number 9 then is potential future agenda items. Are all of those that were on the agenda still there?
For next month, depending on staff availability, we have the introduction to community development. And I potentially have something for overview of funding and budgetary process. I wasn't sure if you wanted to, I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to put that on the next agenda or the one following. And then we've got potentially a brief conversation about in-person versus virtual meetings that I can still put on the agenda if the commission is interested. And that is all for the media next month. For future things, we talked about a Schultz Creek field trip. We had a recommendation for talking about open space versus the Parks and Recreation comparison and considerations. And then a Don Weaver trail alignment chat that could potentially come in July.
So those last 3 are future.
Do we maybe want to add something about a code discussion?
I can certainly add something about that. Okay. I actually just thought of something. Commissioner Wilson. So, in preparation for next month, community development was wondering what specific questions you had about an introduction to community development. So I started compiling a list from our conversations about what those questions could be with Sylvia's help. And I will just show this real quickly to you if that's okay. And we can just add anything that seems like I left out. Can you see my notes there? So these were the questions that I thought the commission had. So an introduction to community development 101. How the city is involved in development requests. Is the city involved in all development requests? What commissions are involved in that process? How do members of the public stay informed? How should the Open Space Commission keep informed? How should the Open Space Commission share information regarding priorities of the open space system when it's related to a development? Can the Open Space Commission be involved if it's something to do with the open space system? I just wanted to make sure that I had a kind of great depiction of that. Or if there's anything that seems excessive or that I didn't capture.
But I think that's excellent.
At day and age, you really. important.
Do any other commissioners have anything that they'd like to see on the agenda? That's not been discussed already.
Pizza.
Pizza. All right, well, hearing none, I guess we'll move on to adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, we're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Good stuff.
Oh, yes.
Are you listening to any boards? Go to